Hello guys, thank you so much for coming back to watch another video on my channel. Resident Evil 9 is going to be the next mainline Resident Evil title, and looking at the trend of the recent Resident Evil titles, we can expect it to be a survival horror game. Now, taking that into consideration, how much worth of a playtime we can expect from Resident Evil 9? Well, let's find out together in this video. If you do end up liking the video I've made for you, do give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. It would allow me to make more of these videos for you guys. Game length is an essential and crucial part of any good game. Any more than necessary can turn a good game into a boring, dull, repetitive game, while a short length can ruin the charm and disengage the player from getting immersed in that experience. However, gaming in general is vast and diverse with different genres. For instance, a length of a game can be sometimes a deal breaker for the gamers and becomes a deciding factor for consumer as how much they're willing to spend on a particular game. The general rule we have seen that linear games tend to focus on 10 to 25 hours and open worlds tend to aim around 30 to 60 hours, whereas RPGs can even exceed that. Horror games follow the same suit, based on the structure of that game, as longer horror games can help create a more immersive experience, allowing the player to become more invested in the story and the characters. This can lead to a more intense emotional response, which is often the goal of a horror game. However, longer horror games can also be more challenging to design and develop as they require more content and a more complex narrative structure. The same thing applies on Resident Evil franchise, as it varied from Resident Evil 1 to Resident Evil Village. Now, some titles in this franchise was well received, even though the game length was short compared to other titles. For example, if we look back to the original Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3. In the same way, Resident Evil 6 had the longest time, reaching nearly 22 hours. However, it was rated as the worst Resident Evil game, which caused Capcom to soft reboot this franchise with Resident Evil 7. Now, Resident Evil 9 is going to be no different. Capcom understands they are on a winning streak at the minute with the quality Resident Evil titles they have been releasing lately. At the same time, it creates an immense pressure on their shoulder while working on Resident Evil 9 as to what fans are now expecting with the game length of this game. Now let's look back at the mainline Resident Evil titles since Resident Evil 7. For example, Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8 share the same game length, which was roughly 10 to 12 hours, including the extra content. This was really appreciated by fans as the game was well received. At the same time, the length of the game allowed enough time to get immersed into the atmospheres of these games. Then we move on to the recent remakes we had from Capcom. Resident Evil 2 Remake was roughly around about 8.5 hours for one scenario, and with both scenarios combined you can easily get 15 hours in, which was a clever way to retell the story from their both perspectives and provide enough time to replay each campaign. Everything story-wise just runs smoothly, and this title received a lot of praise from the fans and the community as it's currently the best-selling Resident Evil title in the franchise. But at the same time, if you look at Resident Evil 3 Remake, the game fell short due to roughly 6 hours long, even though it tried to capture the same magic, however failed to achieve the same heights of Resident Evil 2 Remake. The feedback from fans was that they have cut a lot of content from the original Resident Evil 3 and didn't give enough time to make this game properly. This feedback was taken seriously by Capcom, and with Resident Evil 4 Remake, it followed very closely to the original game and provided a minimum of 16 hours of playtime. It was well received by the critics and fans. Even though the style was different from the mainline Resident Evil titles, the story and gameplay was enough to keep the players captivated. And now, looking at the most recent Resident Evil titles, we can safely assume that Resident Evil 9 will be around about 12 hours, as the most recent Resident Evil games managed to hit that mark, and they all have been successful titles. Furthermore, Capcom has been listening to the fans of this franchise. However, I do personally believe that it will be longer than that, and will have a minimum of 14 plus hours to complete the game. Now the reason behind this, as looking at the more recent rumours we had about Resident Evil 9, it suggests that this game has been in development for a long period of time, and it has the highest amount of budget compared to the previous Resident Evil titles. So it'll make sense, if the game has the highest amount of budget, then it will have enough value and worth of content for the fans to enjoy compared to the previous mainline Resident Evil titles, which already managed to hit that 10 to 12 hours mark. Then looking at the more recent survival horror games which came out in 2023. For example, Dead Space Remake was 15 hours long with side content. Alan Wake 2 was roughly 18 hours for the campaign only, and Capcom's own successful Resident Evil 4 Remake was about 16 hours to complete the main campaign. So I do think the 14 plus hours is ideal time for Resident Evil 9, especially if you take in the recent rumour about the budget into consideration, plus the cost people are willing to spend on the games on these modern consoles is a deciding factor these days, as consumers now think twice if the game has enough content to worth spending $60 to $70 or pound on that game. I personally think Resident Evil 9 will potentially have 14 plus hours worth of content, which is the perfect sort of time for a next Resident Evil title. So what do you guys think about the game length we can expect from Resident Evil 9? I know some of you are going to disagree with my opinion, so please do let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below in this video. So that's it for the video, guys. I'll catch you again with another video on my channel. Until then, look after yourself. Have a good one.